In 2022, New Orleans, nestled along the Mississippi River in the state of Louisiana, saw a drastic increase in violent crime. With 70 slayings per 100,000 residents and 482 shootings during the year, the city is on track to have the highest rate of killings in the nation. Experts have noted that crime rates haven't been this bad since Hurricane Katrina, and before that, the 1990s. Although we cannot cover every single cold case in the city, we can make a start by shedding light on a few of these unsolved mysteries. In today's video, we'll be exploring 3 horrific cold cases from New Orleans. But first, I'd like to thank BetterHelp for sponsoring today's episode. Your mental health is not something to be taken lightly. Whether you've experienced something traumatic or it's something you're dealing with long term, we all need support sometimes, but it's not always the easiest thing to access. There are often long waits to even get to speak to a therapist, which isn't exactly ideal when you have a mental health crisis. BetterHelp is one of the world's largest therapy services, with over 25,000 licensed and experienced therapists who cover a wide range of issues. All you need to do to get started is answer a few questions about what you want from therapy, and BetterHelp will match you with the right therapist for you. If you find, for any reason, that your therapist isn't quite the right match, you can always switch to another free of charge. Once connected with your therapist, you can communicate with them however you want, whether that's by call, video, or message. You can message your therapist at any time and set up live sessions when it's most convenient for you. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/coldcasedetective. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com. It's also linked below in the description. And now let's dive in with today's mysteries. Goddess Diamond. On June 5th, 2016, a woman's body was discovered in a burned-out car at the 4400 block of Fleet Court in New Orleans. Her autopsy would later show that she was attacked and died due to blunt force trauma. Goddess Diamond was a 20-year-old trans woman who grew up in the lower 9th Ward before moving to Norcross, Georgia, where she attended high school after Hurricane Katrina hit. In 2015, she returned to New Orleans, and shortly before her murder, she'd started living at the Chenow Creek Apartments. She was last heard from on June 4th, when she'd borrowed a car from her roommate so that she could go to a party. In the aftermath of Goddess's death, newspapers reported that surveillance footage existed, showing a man walking toward the car just moments before it burst into flames. This same individual is seen walking away from the vehicle, but then returning twice. On one of these occasions, he had a container of accelerant. One anonymous source told reporters that she had heard a blast at around 4:15 a.m., waking from her sleep to see a black Toyota Camry ablaze outside her window. She quickly called emergency services, and it was just after the fire had been extinguished that a body was found in the passenger seat. Goddess's mother, Antoinette, described her daughter as kind and loving, with a big heart. She had ambitions of becoming either a vet or a makeup artist and hairstylist, and always kept out of trouble. The 20-year-old worked at a Walmart store where she was beloved by her colleagues, and friends referred to her as not just a close companion, but an LGBT leader. Notably, at the time of her death, Goddess's first name was still her birth name, and according to one friend and colleague, she had been in the middle of transitioning before dying. It is unclear whether or not she planned to change her name in the future, as her birth name is often considered as unisex. Antoinette still referred to her child using male pronouns when speaking to reporters. She noted that Goddess may have been the victim of a hate crime, noting that she knew the 20-year-old was a gay man and that she presented as a woman, but also stated that there were certain aspects of his life that we didn't talk about. She maintained that whatever way Goddess lived her life, she loved her no less. Despite the fact that 7 years have passed since Goddess's death, her case is still unsolved, and no updates have emerged in recent years. Her death was investigated as a homicide and arson, but the senior public information officer for the New Orleans PD, Dawn Massey, noted that they'd yet to find an indication that the murder was motivated by Goddess's gender identity. News articles on the case are few and far between, and it seems that progress in the investigation has completely halted. Following Goddess's death, Antoinette set up a fundraiser to pay for burial expenses. Noting that she may never know what happened to her child, she has stated her confidence that one way or another, someone will pay, stating, "Even if they never stand before a judge and jury, they'll stand before God, and his wrath is way worse than anything man could issue." Ramona Brown. On March 6, 1984, in the neighborhood of Algiers, a fire broke out in a building housing a family of 12. In the hours before the blaze began, Aubrey and Johnny Mae Brown, along with most of their 10 children, sat together in front of the dining room fireplace. 2 of the children were already asleep in bed, while a third, a teenager, talked on the phone with her boyfriend until around 3 a.m. A further 2 children, Aubrey Jr., aged 4, and Kevin, 2, fell asleep on the sofa in the living room. The house fire began in one of 3 bedrooms, specifically the bedroom belonging to the girls. It is still unclear today, however, what caused it. Firefighters were alerted at 3:05 a.m., and a spokesperson told local newspapers the following day that the fire was under control around 30 minutes after they'd received the call. Aubrey Jr. and Kevin, the youngest children asleep on the sofa, were the only 2 unable to escape the blaze. Their bodies were discovered by firefighters after the flames were put out. Their sister, Simona, who was 6 at the time, recalled, "All you could hear was, 'Mum, Dad, help me, please.'" She also added that when their remains were found, Aubrey was hugging Kevin. I guess he was trying to protect him from the fire. While Kevin and Aubrey Jr. were accounted for, a third sibling, 3-year-old Ramona, was still missing. Her body was not recovered from the scene, nor was she with the rest of the family. Investigators combed through the remains of the house 3 times before consulting with a local funeral home to inquire as to whether or not a human body could have been burned in a house fire to the extent that only ash was left behind. But detectives soon found out that this couldn't have been the case. They discovered that to burn a body thoroughly, 1800 to 2100 degrees would have been needed, and the average house fire only reaches 1400 degrees, and the blaze would have had to have occurred for a period of 2.5 hours. Furthermore, even after all of this, bones and fragments would have still remained, and they would have been easily identifiable as human. No such remnants were found at the scene. Satisfied that Ramona was not in the remains of the family home, authorities turned their attention to the large storm drains running through the neighborhood. With bars wide enough for a 3-year-old to squeeze through, they theorized that she may have fled in fear, and they decided to open up all the storm drains. However, she was not discovered. 1 week later, the police informed the family that they would be ceasing their search for the toddler. But unbeknownst to the police, just 1 day after the fire, 6-year-old Simona had told her mother a chilling story, that while the children stood outside of their blazing home, a couple in a bronze or brown car pulled up and offered to watch Ramona. The toddler climbed into the vehicle and was driven off with the pair, never to be seen again. Simona remembered that the couple was older and interracial, and the car was a bronze-colored sedan. They promised to take good care of Ramona before they left. Simona recalled, "A bronze-looking Cadillac just pulled up, an old black man and an old white lady offering to help us out. They'll watch her for us." I was like, okay, cool. So when Ramona got in, that was it. Gone. Simona said that she thought nothing of the couple offering their help, as most people did in the neighborhood at the time. She didn't tell the police what she'd seen, as she was too traumatized by what had happened. "I just lost 2 siblings in a fire. I had seen the people bring 2 body bags out. It was just too much." Detectives at the time noted that they hadn't considered the possibility that Ramona had been kidnapped, and the family never informed them of what they'd seen. Simona was the only one to have seen her little sister climb into the car that night, but days after she went missing, her grandmother, Dorothy, believes she heard from Ramona. It's been so long, but I know. I have a sharp mind. The telephone rang. This was about 2-3 days later. The telephone rang. I picked up the phone, and I say, hello. And somebody said, Ma. I said, who is this? Al, it said. Al, where you at? And I didn't hear no more. Somebody took the phone from her. That was the last call I got. Al was the family's nickname for Ramona. Nobody called her by her full name. While Dorothy told her daughter, the children's mother, about the call, nobody reported the incident to the police. Johnny May noted that the couple built their new home on the same property as their old one, stating, the reason for that is because if she ever decides to come home, we're here. I'm not moving. I'm gonna stay here till the end. I'm gonna stay here. All she has to do is come on home. The family residence caught fire 2 more times, with the second blaze occurring in 1993. Luckily, no further harm came to the children. At the time of Ramona's disappearance, a missing persons case was not opened, although the family were informed that they could open one if they wished. It wasn't until 2018 that Simona did so. Johnny May passed away in June of 2019, age 67, but Ramona's siblings are still looking for her. Some of them have added their DNA to genealogy databases, with the hopes that Ramona is looking for them too, but as of 2023, there have been no new updates. Ramona vanished from her family home in Algiers on the night of March 6, 1984. She is a black female and was just 3 years old at the time of her disappearance. Her sister witnessed her entering a bronze-colored sedan, possibly a Cadillac, with an older couple described as a black man and a white woman. She has never been seen since. If she is still alive, she will be 42 years old. If you have any information about Ramona's case, you can call the New Orleans PD 4th District Detectives at 504-658-6040. The Upstairs Lounge Fire. During the 1970s, the Upstairs Lounge was one of the most welcoming places to be as an LGBTQ+ individual. The second-floor bar, located at 604 Iberville Street, featured a piano player and performances, and welcomed a diverse crowd, from members of the LGBTQ+ community to black and other non-white minorities. It was also frequented by members of the Metropolitan Community Church, or the MCC, a denomination of Protestant Christians who are pro-LGBT. On Sunday, June 24th, 1973, the club held their regular Beer Bust drink special, which lasted from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. and had around 110 patrons. Upon its end, many customers left, with about 60 to 90 individuals remaining behind. Survivors of the fire would later report that they recalled smelling gasoline at the time, but thought nothing of it. Shortly before 8 p.m., the doorbell rang. The bartender, an Air Force veteran named Buddy Rasmussen, assumed that somebody had ordered a taxi and sent someone to open the door. When the door was opened, however, those inside the bar saw the staircase on fire, and the smell of lighter fluid was strong in the air. Bartender Buddy Rasmussen led around 20 customers out of the bar using the exit to the roof, where they were able to climb to the building next door and make their way to safety. Some patrons attempted to escape through the lounge's large windows, despite the fact there were safety bars on them. Still, some people managed to leave this way. Luther Boggs, the man who'd been sent by Buddy to open the door, was one of these people. However, he suffered burns in the process and died 16 days after the fire, having received third-degree burns to 50% of his body. Firefighters struggled to reach the scene, blocked by cars and pedestrian traffic, though when they arrived, they were able to bring the fire under control in a timely manner. The fire lasted 16 minutes. Notably, the bar was said to have not been equipped with the proper safety measures in the case of a fire. The emergency exit wasn't marked, and there were bars covering the windows, as previously mentioned. It is unclear how, but the door through which Buddy and 20 patrons escaped became locked shortly after their exit, preventing the remaining customers from being able to leave the building this way. In total, 32 people died in the fire, including members of the MCC. Reverend Bill Larson died attempting to remove an air conditioning unit from one of the large windows when an upper pane of glass fell on him and pinned him in place. Assistant Pastor George Mitchell escaped, but returned when he realized his partner was still inside the lounge. Both perished in the flames. Back at his home, George's children waited for their father's return. watching the same movie 7 times over to pass the time. 28 people died at the scene, while 1 passed away en route to the hospital. 18 individuals were injured, with 3 dying from their wounds afterwards. The police investigation into the arson attack saw no convictions. Law enforcement's main suspect was a man named Roger Dale Nunes, a patron who'd been removed from the lounge earlier in the evening after fighting with another customer. It was reported that while he was being escorted off the premises, Nunes threatened to come back and burn you all out. Although police attempted to question him, his broken jaw meant that he could not respond. According to the police records, he was questioned again later. A witness claimed to have been in and out of the bar during the 10 to 20 minutes before the fire began, and stated that he saw nobody enter or exit the building. The witness, presented by Nunes, was deemed to be stressed by investigators as they spoke. Because of this, they saw the individual as a liar. In 1970, 3 years before the fire, Nunes was diagnosed with conversion disorder. In order to seek treatment for his condition, he spent time visiting numerous psychiatric clinics and was released from a treatment facility in 1972. A friend of his later told investigators that he had confessed on at least 4 different occasions to starting the fire. He claimed to have put Ronsonol lighter fluid on the bottom steps and tossed a match. He'd purchased the fluid from a local Walgreens and claimed that he didn't expect the entire building to go up in flames. Nunes was never charged, however, and took his own life in 1974. The case was closed in 1980, as investigators had no other leads to go on. Sadly, the horrific event of the upstairs lounge arson attack received very little acknowledgement within the local community and beyond it. Many radio show hosts and TV news presenters made light of the tragedy, and survivors refused to show their faces, knowing it would lead to shame, stigma, and unemployment. Some of those who were injured in the fire lost their jobs. One man learned on his deathbed that he'd been sacked from his teaching job. Even government bodies failed to acknowledge the massacre, and the WVUE Channel 8 reported on an anonymous phone call that stated that the bar was firebombed by a vigilante group that has declared war on homosexuals in New Orleans. This supposed vigilante group claimed that all its members, several women and 5 men, had been sexually assaulted by members of the LGBTQ+ community. 21-year-old patron Ronnie Rosenthal, as well as his friends, were taken to the morgue on the day of the fire to help identify the bodies. Many customers had thrown their wallets from the fire in order to hide their identities. Ronnie recalled that many bodies went unclaimed by their families, who were, quote, too ashamed to collect the remains of their gay sons and brothers, adding, quote, they just let their kids go. It was the most horrific thing. 3 victims were never identified and were buried in the paupers' graves. Due to the stigma around homosexuality in the 1970s, churches refused to hold funerals, and many funeral homes declined to bury the bodies. On July 1st, St. Mark's United Methodist Church held a memorial and prayer service for the victims, attended by nearly 300 people. Journalists and photographers waited outside to, quote, expose members of the closeted gay community in New Orleans. Those who attended were offered an alternative back exit, but many refused to use it, deciding to face the media and present a unified front to honor those who had died in the fire. Until the 2016 Pulse nightclub shooting, the upstairs lounge arson attack was the deadliest attack on a gay club in US history. Despite the gravity of the event, it is often labeled as a forgotten tragedy, as many people, even members of the LGBTQ+ community, are unaware of the story. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own thoughts and speculations, and remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.